All right. What's up, nerds? Welcome back. This is going to be a little different than the normal podcast. We're going to talk about nerd life and what it means to follow Jesus, but also have a little nerdy side to us. So, who I have with me? I have Dane. What is up, Dane?
Hey, Michael, thanks for having me here.
It's so good to have you, bro. So quick, like how we met is through this group called the Gaborum, right? We went to
hmm
the past together. Uh, that was just
Yeah, got my hat
sometimes I
on. So.
I think of, yeah, you got your
Yeah.
hat on. I was trying to find one of my shirts, but I couldn't
Yeah.
find one. But yeah, we helped them film a short film. Man, I wish that took off, but God knows.
Mhm.
God has a plan.
Yeah.
And anytime I think about being cold or I think I might be cold, I think of that time
Yeah, when
because
you're wearing basically
I've
tights and
never
nothing else out in
I've never
the
been more cold in my entire life. Well, the first day, who was it? Um, Brad told us to cut him off so they
Yeah.
weren't seen in the film. A lot of guys didn't, but I was one of the dumb guys that followed orders. And so I was in like short sleeves and shorts in what 20-degree, like
Yeah.
very very fast moving wind, kind of in the ice box as we figured out it was
hmm
called. So anyway, man, anyway,
Yeah.
tell me
What a great
about you.
time. So.
Who is Dane? That's what I want to know. Because I don't
Yeah.
know much about you. I see you on the internet, and I love your Instagram reel, your stories and stuff you post on there. So informative because I love that side of the Bible and the Hebrew, all that kind of stuff. I love that, and I know you do too. So we're gonna get on out into all of that. All right.
Yeah.
So where did you grow up? What was your upbringing like?
Yeah. So I grew up in Minnesota, born and raised in
Mm,
Minnesota, and I grew up in a Christian home. My parents, kind of going back, they weren't the biggest Christians maybe in their walk, but once they became a family, they're like, we want to make this a commitment. So I'm one of five kids, and we grew up going to church, going to Sunday school, going to Bible camp, doing all the things with that. So it's
all
just
the
part of my
things, yeah,
life. Yeah, growing
yeah.
up.
Love
So.
that. Love that. So were you, I mean, you're outdoorsy now. We'll get into that, but like, were you guys outdoorsy growing up?
Yeah, we always went on camping trips. That was kind of
Yeah.
vacations we liked, load up in the van, bring a tent, and see where we end up. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. So like, same here. I grew up in Florida, so we did a lot
Mhm.
of camping down there and fishing and stuff. And but we never did it in tents because my mom
Oh yeah.
is a princess, and so she had to have
Yeah.
some type of those old school like pop-up campers. You remember those that like
Yeah.
well, and they're still around today,
Oh
not
yeah.
as much, but they make a ton of sense how they like pop up and fold out and all that.
Yeah.
So
Doesn't take
yeah,
much space.
that's
But yeah, we
cool.
did the tents. So that was getting
Yeah,
outdoors. And I was homeschooled growing up. So we always had opportunities just to go out and play
yeah,
and
yeah.
enjoy life that way. So
So, what was homeschooled like for you growing up? Like, how much of school did you actually do, and how much like of like outside kind of stuff did you do? Because I'm always curious. Different families kind of did it differently.
yeah. So my parents, they ran their own business. They had in-homes for people with mental disabilities. And so starting in, third, fourth grade, I started mowing lawns, then doing maintenance work. So I was working for them,
Hmm.
kind of getting around. They had a few houses around the town. So I would be on the riding lawnmower, going house to house instead of doing school
Nice,
sometimes,
nice.
doing that. So it was kind of learning more practical things, I guess, than the
Yeah,
typical math and science and stuff.
right, right. Super similar then to me
Yeah.
because dad always worked on boats growing up, and so
hmm
young age, too young really to be,
Yeah.
because that's kind of an intense place,
Yeah.
lots of heavy machinery and stuff.
hmm
And so, but yeah, we would go to work and, like you said, like learn more arithmetic in a way you actually use it instead of, I mean, you use some of the stuff you learn in books, but
Yeah.
if you're actually doing, using a measuring tape, I can't. So many people I meet that like pull out a measuring tape and they're like, "Why is there so many little ticks and lines?" And I'm like, "What do you
Yeah.
mean?" And how you add those together and stuff.
hmm
So,
Yeah, so
okay,
I've just learned
so
more hands-on. That's how I
so
love to learn. So,
during the younger homeschool years, what was your fandom? What was the thing you kind of gravitated towards?
yeah, so put on my Green Arrow shirt. I love
Yes.
DC Comics. That's
Yeah.
what I love. Started collecting comic books when I was young, and diving into those stories. You just like love the
Yeah.
superheroes, love kind of the. I love DC Comics because they kind of have more realness to them at times, I feel like.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's true.
and so
I
diving into their
never
stories.
I never really got, I don't know why, I never really got into comics for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I love like superheroes and all that, and
hmm
if I was gonna pick one, it would be Green Arrow because
Yeah.
he's like Robin Hood, and I love
Oh yeah.
Robin Hood. Also Link. I mean, anything green and a
Yep.
bow and arrow, I'm in. I'm
That's
in.
it. Yeah. So that's where I kind of grew up doing all
Yeah.
that. And then we watched Lord of the Rings growing up. We watched Star
Yeah.
Wars, Indiana Jones, one of my
Oh yeah.
favorites, and that whole
That's where it's
story.
at.
And so the archaeologist side of Indiana
Yeah.
Jones, the very first edition of Green Arrow, he was an archaeologist.
Really?
Yeah, and back in the
Isn't
golden
isn't in
era.
like the main story? I just know this from the show, but
Yeah.
I assume it's a lot like the comics where he's just kind of like Batman almost.
Yep. That's what it turned into. But the original
That's
Green Arrow,
archaeologist is way cooler.
yeah,
Dang
he had a
it. Dang it.
museum burned down, and then he
Yeah.
became a superhero after that. Is the original
Oh,
story.
I
So
like that story way better.
yeah, they don't follow that anymore. So
So, did you kind of get into, biblical stuff like you study mainly because of that?
yeah, so I love Indiana Jones, Green Arrow. Back when it was the archaeologist stuff, that's what just got me excited about studying the biblical text.
Hmm.
So yeah, I never graduated college, but I just
Who
learned
needs it?
hands on, you know, that stuff. But gone to Israel a few times, been to
Really?
Egypt, going to Turkey,
Wow.
Greece this next year. Just finding
Wow.
ways to understand the Bible in context
Yeah.
and diving into just the history and the studies you get from that.
I've heard, I mean, I'm sure they've done this forever, but I've heard recently they're going to the Bible more and more to like figure out where cities and things were because it's the
Yeah.
most accurate text that they have to like where exactly stuff was. I
Hmm.
think that's so cool. That's such a
Yeah, when they were looking for
no-brainer.
Jericho, they kept looking in different spots, and it's secular archaeologists just digging. They know
Yeah.
Jericho existed, but the original
Somewhere
city.
around here.
Yeah, but they were like, "Oh, the Bible says it's here, so let's dig
Yeah.
there," and then they found
And
it.
they found it.
So yeah,
That's wild. That's wild. And I've heard like that, especially that story, that it's almost like someone literally like pushed the walls down. Is that
yeah,
true? I
yeah. The
haven't
way the
looked into it
walls,
too much.
yeah, the ways the walls fell in, it wasn't just like a deterioration of the walls, but like
Yeah.
the way that they fell
Something
in. Or
happened.
yeah,
That's so cool. I love
yeah,
that stuff. So, young homeschooler, going camping a bunch, stuff like that. Let's see. What was like something a story or something you remember camping that you're just like, because I've got two or three in my mind that I will never forget. I love them so much. So what about you?
yeah. I think one, we were out in South Dakota near Aberdeen area, and my brother and I, we were, third, fourth grade, something like that. And we just wandered off into the woods. And this is kind of like a public campsite. There's a lot of different people around, but we just wandered off. And we thought our family was behind us, but they weren't. So we turned around and they
Yeah.
weren't there. So we walked back to the trail and they were looking for us. And
Hmm.
we ended up going to like the park office and sitting there waiting while they're trying to track our family down. And so we were just
Really?
like having a good time wandering
Yeah.
around. They gave us some free snacks and some drinks.
Yes.
We were
Free
like, this is a
snacks.
good time. So
Yeah.
our
And
family's
I
like,
feel like
yeah,
that's a rite of passage for a kid. It's like
yeah,
their family,
wander
and
off.
it happened to Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Jesus' family, like, oh, they kept going, and he was back at the temple, and they're like, I thought you were watching. I wasn't watching
Yeah.
him. But yeah, I feel like that's a rite of passage. And nowadays, heck no, man.
Oh, yeah.
If I've got three girls, and if we go anywhere, I'm always watching at least two of
Yeah.
them. My wife, the third, is not even a year yet. But man, I'm watching those kids like a hawk with a
Yeah.
gun trained, ready to pounce on anybody. But
Yeah.
different times, different
Oh
times.
yeah. So our family was kind of
Um,
mad that they wasted the whole afternoon looking for us while we were having
yeah,
fun. So
you guys are just having ice cream. Hi,
yeah.
mom. I love that. I love that so much. So with the Green Arrow and the archaeology, what kind of other than the archaeology of the Bible, that sort of thing, what about Green Arrow that you can find some biblical themes in? I mean, I could think of a couple off the top of my head, but what kind of
Yeah.
stands out for you?
So I work in summer camp and we do themes every
You
summer. And
basically
this
have a dream job. I mean,
yeah,
go
student
ahead.
camp.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
But we did our summer theme based off the story of Joseph in Genesis. What God or what they intended for
Yes.
evil, God meant for good was our theme
My favorite.
passage.
One of my
And
favorites, yeah.
kind of looking at how that related, just my life looking at stuff. So Green Arrow, he was, kind of his father loved him. He was got favored, kind of spoiled, and then he
Yeah.
was outcast from his home. He was put in prison. He was kind of tortured in that sense, and then he
Right,
was
yeah.
favored. He kind of rose to spots of power. Green Arrow became mayor at different times and got reunited with his family. Looking
Hmm.
at Joseph, he was favored. He was spoiled
And
with the coat. Yeah.
yeah, if you think about it, he was also kind of in disguise almost. Like
Hmm.
his family didn't recognize him basically.
Yeah.
Man,
Until he
that's
revealed
good.
who he was. And
Yeah.
yeah, he was, in prison, he was favored, and then he rose to power. And
Hmm.
so kind of looking at some of those ways that they
Yeah,
connect.
second in command to Pharaoh, who. Yeah, dude, that's a good connection. I've never made that. I'm gonna steal that and make a video on
Yeah.
it. Okay, so going on to like preteen kind of ages,
Hmm.
what kind of youth groups? I'm sure you were in some amazing ones, but what kind of youth groups were you
Yeah, so my church was very small,
in?
40, 50 people, maybe on a good Sunday. And my dad was kind of our unofficial youth pastor, just kind of, he was
Gotcha.
there. Most of his kids made up, their youth group
Yeah.
anyway. So we were there. So it was just kind of, he doesn't have a Bible degree. He graduated with cartography, map making, and so
Wow,
he was
cool.
just going to talk
Who
about the Bible
doesn't
as,
love a good map? I mean, I got maps
yeah.
surrounding my office in here.
Yeah.
Love
But he was
that.
just kind of, as he was learning and teaching, and we were just
Right.
diving into the Bible together, just the small group that we had. So.
Very cool, dude. Very cool. Wow. So do you have kind of a I guess you like your true testimony, like a come to Jesus moment. I know you kind of grew up in that, but
Yeah.
when did you feel like it was your faith? Because I know growing up in Bible Belts or growing up in a Christian
Hmm.
household, a lot of times it's either like you grow up in it and you turn away from it because your parents really weren't in it
Yeah.
and you realize that and so you kind of run, or did you kind of figure it out? Okay, this is my faith now. This is where I truly believe in Jesus. Tell me about
Hmm.
that.
Yeah. So it was around fourth grade that I decided to be baptized. I was like, okay, I believe this is
Yeah,
to be true. I'm gonna make a decision about that. And
yeah.
it was at that time it felt like, oh, that's what you're supposed to do. Not,
Hmm.
like, oh, believe in Jesus, be baptized. But then it was a couple years later, it was about eighth grade or so, I fell out of a second story window and landed on my head. And I was
Whoa.
kind of sitting in this windowsill that was kind of open, and the door shifted the air pressure or something, and I fell out.
Wow.
And that kind of caused some long-term memory issues, but also some sleep issues. So
Really?
struggled with sleep and not be able to do that. And during that time, that's when I was like, I believe in God, I trust in God, but like life just sucked at that time. I just wasn't sleeping, being
Yeah.
homeschooled, not very many friends, just kind of like, what am I doing in my life? So
Yeah.
trying to understand that. And during that time just led to this deep doubt of depression and just kind of walking through that, just like, okay, God, why am I alive? Why am I living? Just trying to figure
Yeah.
that out. And during that time, I was taking some sleeping medication to try to just help me sleep. And one night I decided to take more than I should.
Really?
Um, and I woke up the next morning, which was more of a surprise. And so it was kind of at that moment where God's like, okay, I'm not done with you. I have a
Yeah.
plan for you. Like, so it was kind of
Yeah.
this literal wake up
I
call.
saved you from the window. Come on, kid.
Yeah. This literal wake up call that I had of like,
Yeah.
okay, no, God's going to do something else. Like,
Wow.
not just, okay, life sucks for maybe a moment, but
Hmm.
to continue to trust and focus on Him. And that's kind of, I'd say, when it became more real. And I still
Yeah.
struggled with sleep and depression. And,
Yeah.
but God's been able to use that. I've been able to talk. I work with a lot of high schoolers and college students, and
Yeah.
depression and anxiety is huge. And
Yeah.
so being able to tell them my story and kind of walk them through that has been great.
Man, that's awesome. That's crazy. There's a story in Acts, right, where like a kid falls out of a window when they're like where the prayer
Yeah,
room
when
is or
Paul's
something.
Paul's teaching and he falls
Yeah, he's
asleep,
teaching
and
so long that the kid's like,
yeah,
That's
Paul
crazy.
revives him. Yeah,
So when that happened, like what story? How many stories was
it
it?
was like
Did
a
you say?
second story. Yeah,
And you fell on your head,
yeah. Well, I fell out
dude.
and then I hit like a railing below and then kind of hit the ground and
Yeah.
slid into a tree. So
But I mean, were you relatively okay? Did you have to get rushed to the hospital, like all
they
that
did, I
stuff?
mean, I went to the doctor, but like
Yeah.
no physical damage.
Right.
Ended up getting a concussion that was
Right.
noticeable right away, but
Right.
the sleep stuff, we started
Yeah.
tracking later after I wasn't sleeping. So
How about now? You sleeping good now?
it's better. It's on and off. It kind of
Is it?
comes and goes. So
Yeah.
sometimes, the stress of work or life, and you're just up all
Right.
night, or so
Right.
it's, but
But
yeah,
like you said, I mean, with the story of Joseph, like you said, like now you're relating with the depression, anxiety with all these
hmm,
kids you're seeing all the time,
yeah,
which is huge. I know, and I can see the spiritual warfare of depression and anxiety because that's
hmm,
to me it all wraps up in identity, which is almost pretty much every not what's the opposite of solution? Like every problem we have is
yeah,
like wrapped up in identity.
hmm,
People just, I mean, you know this. We just got to proclaim this like you are a child of God.
yeah,
Male, female, whatever you want to call yourself. First and foremost, I always try to tell people this: you are a child of God. You are
hmm,
the image of God. Like that
yeah,
is you. So the whole depression thing, it's like, man, don't be depressed. You're literally made in His spitting image. You are the apple
hmm,
of His eye. So what do you got to be sad about, right?
yeah.
But that's I got to get to that point. But I got to get in front of these people first.
Yeah. And as
Um,
Christians, there's sometimes a negative view on depression. Like
yeah,
King
right.
David, he says,
Yeah,
I wet my bed with tears,
yeah,
one of my favorite theologians, Charles Spurgeon, he went through depression too. And it's just, how do we walk with God in that? And a lot of it's, okay, what do we
Yeah.
choose to do in that moment of depression? Do we
Yeah.
turn our hearts towards him or focus on self? So
Yeah. And my wife battles with anxiety, mainly just being a mom and just,
yeah.
she sees all this world and all the things. And me, my personality, I'm just like, the best way to be not anxious is don't be anxious.
Yeah.
She's like, you're an idiot. Shut up. And so I don't,
Doesn't always work that way.
when
Yeah.
I get to that point of anxiety, bro, I'm in like the deepest. I feel like I'm David, where I can hit high highs and really low lows,
Yeah.
and I'm either in one or the other, or I'm like on that journey of one or the other. So I think like the whole depression anxiety thing is like constantly renewing your
Hmm.
mind and reminding yourself, this is who I am, this is what God's given me, like, and just keeping that in mind. And He is God, I am not. So keeping that anxiety low.
Yeah.
Like I can't control really anything. I mean, I can
Hmm.
control my attitude, my response, and all that kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
oh, I did. Speaking of, this is a good time to. I wrote this down. I heard this. I'm a stickler of like keeping a notepad.
Yeah.
Um, I guess the writer in me, like I'm
Yep.
constant. Anything I hear, I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
And
So I put my notes in my phone all the time, just
see,
constantly.
I do
Yeah.
that. I do that, but I think that way it doesn't get lost as
Oh
much.
yeah.
I'm starting an actual notepad. I still do it on my phone, but that way at like the end of the day or end of like a week,
Yeah.
I can kind of plug it into different places. But anyway, I heard this. Your only responsibility is your response to God's ability.
Hmm.
And it's a cool play on words. It
Yeah.
sounds cool, but like if you really chew on it, that really is your only responsibility, is your
Yeah.
response to His ability, and not
Hmm.
trying to, like, especially with this channel that I've been doing it for like a year, and I want to see the growth, I want to see the numbers, and
Yeah.
yada yada yada. And man, God is this past month has just been wrecking me
Hmm.
of like my son, God in the flesh had 12 followers technically.
Yeah.
12, okay? And He changed the entire world.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you doing with the followers that you already have? And I'm like,
Hmm.
dang, cuz I'm being anxious about the future, about how many followers I can get to get this thing, funded or whatever. I can do it
Yeah.
full time and blah 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 blah. And I'm not being a good steward with literally what He's given me, the
Hmm.
followers that I have. And so I'm
Yeah.
I'm trying to redirect that about the best way I can steward that. And so I'm starting something up in the new year.
Hmm.
Are you familiar with the hero's journey?
Yeah.
So I'm technically, I think it's between 7 and 12 like steps. I'm
Okay. Yeah.
taking the 12-step idea, and basically I started a Bible study a while back. That's actually how this channel started, was a Bible
Hmm.
study, but adventuring the way. So following Jesus, but like treating it as an adventure.
Oh yeah.
Because, if a wizard knocked on your door, you would go follow him, right?
Yeah.
Or if, you got a letter from Hogwarts, or, if you're into that, like you would go become a
Go do it.
wizard. How
Yeah.
cool would that be? So Jesus is saying, follow me. But we say, okay, cool. We raise our hand or whatever, but we don't
Hmm.
actually follow Him. We don't
Yeah.
actually like treat that in our everyday life. So what I want to do, and I think is the way this channel is going, is how do we actually follow Him every single day of our life and treat it like an adventure with
Yeah.
quests and side quests and NPCs that we can convert into like
Hmm.
members of our party, and like all in
Yeah.
very heavy like D&D kind of
Oh
terms.
yeah.
Who doesn't love that though?
Yeah.
So anyway, enough about me. We're going back to Dane. I
Yeah.
apologize. I just get excited about this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so youth group age, so right around teen age. What are you doing now?
Yeah. So that's kind of the whole window story kind of led to that time. But then I was
Yeah.
heading to, preparing for high school or at post high school and college. And again, I never loved the schooling aspect. So I was figuring out, do I go to school, college, or do I just start working full time somewhere? And I just felt this calling to go to college. So I went to University of Northwestern in St. Paul for youth ministry. I'm like, all right, I'll just see
Mm,
where this goes.
perfect. Yeah.
And I hated that year. I mean,
Yeah.
school was great. I just like, oh, I hate papers. I hate tests.
Yeah.
I love writing, but like not papers, and that's all very
Right.
different. type of
Yeah, because
thing.
papers you like have to like literally stick to a certain whatever, and you're
Yeah.
creative. You're like, I don't want to do that. That's stupid.
Yeah, most of my writing is for I'm going to speak or present something, so I
Yeah,
write it like I'm speaking. And my
right.
wife goes, "Dane, this isn't like a paper. This like you're writing like you speak." I'm like, "Yeah, because that's
Yeah,
all I do
because
is
that
just
makes
speak."
sense to
So,
me.
yeah.
I love
So I
that.
went to school, and then that next year, I'm like, after my freshman year, I was like, "Oh, do I go back or not?" And I went back for another semester. And then during that time, I heard about a program called YWAM, Youth with a Mission.
Hmm.
And so I ended up dropping out of school halfway through my sophomore year and I joined YWAM. And I ended up going to Australia, doing some discipleship training, and then went to
Wow,
Mongolia, China, doing missions for the next 3 months out there.
man, that's cool. So you really have, I mean, you've lived a pretty adventurous life, man.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So what kind
Some
of adventures did you find in Australia? Did you get a boomerang?
I did not get a boomerang,
Oh my
no.
gosh, why go to Australia if you don't get a boomerang?
Ate some
Come on.
Vegemite and other stuff, but I'm like, if I'm going to go somewhere, I'm going to go as far away as I can.
Yeah,
And on the way out there, just kind of Mark 4 just kept being reminded in my head. It was when Jesus says, "Get in the boat. We're going to the other side of the lake." The
yeah,
disciples get in the boat, and then the storm came.
right.
And then, Jesus calms the storm, and Jesus
Yeah,
knew the storm was coming, right? He's
right.
God. He knows these things.
Yeah.
But he still said, "Get in the boat and trust me."
Uh-huh.
And during this whole
And
time,
then he
getting
went
on
to
a,
sleep.
yeah,
I
getting on a
love that.
plane, flying across the whole world, literally
Yeah,
the other side of the world. I just felt like God said, "Okay, get in the plane, go across the
yeah.
water, and just trust me."
And then he went
Kind
and
of
took a
scene.
nap, and you're like, ah.
Yeah, what am I doing out here?
Yeah.
And the crazy thing, so paying for this program, I was told through the school I was at that they would help cover the cost because it was a ministry thing, and they would pay the whole fee for this program. I'm like, sweet, I don't need to go fundraising, I don't need to do
Yeah.
support raising. This would be great. 2 days before I fly out to Australia, they say, "Hey, the funds can't go through. You're on your
Oh,
own." And I'm
man.
like, I could have spent the past 3 months
Yeah.
fundraising, but now I fly out in 2 days. I already bought my plane ticket. So it's kind of like I just felt God saying, "Get in the boat, get in the plane,
Yeah.
go
Right.
across the water." And I'm like, all right.
Right.
And by the time I got there, it worked out, or ended up raising the funds from overseas instead of
Okay.
here in America. Face to face is a lot better than
Yeah. Right. That's true.
I didn't have a phone, so I was like trying to message people on the computer I used every now and then, and
Right.
it was a crazy, crazy time. But God definitely
Wow.
just showed that He was true. He's like, "Hey, trust me in this." Because growing up in Midwestern, Bible America, it's kind of like that's just the way it is. But going
Mhm.
somewhere is completely different. God just
And you
revealed
like
Himself.
literally took a step of faith of like, I don't have the
Yeah.
money. I'm surprised they even let you go without having it paid for,
Yeah.
right?
Well, they said you need to pay the first half within the first couple of weeks, and the second half.
Okay.
So like they had a program kind of or a
Yeah.
guideline set up with that. But
Right.
yeah.
Man, that's crazy. Okay, so Australia, other than getting there, what kind of what exactly did you do?
Yeah, so with YWAM, they do DTS, which is Discipleship Training School, and each
Yeah.
week we went through a different topic. So we studied, the Father Heart of God, studied Lordship of Christ, the Holy Spirit,
Hmm.
evangelism, different things every week. And during that time, every week we'd go out local areas, the mall, the beach, and just do evangelism, just talking
Hmm.
to people, doing, playing music, doing things just to get people interested. During that time, we also went on a 2 week camping trip to do our classes out in the bush. We just got away
Wow.
from everybody and just slept in tents for 2 weeks and did our
I hope
studies
you
out
guys had a
there.
guide because it's probably pretty
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah.
I love it though.
So just things like that, just getting away and kind of preparing for the outreach side of things. Because YWAM's whole thing is to know God and make him known. So we spend the
Yeah, I
first
love
time
that. Yeah.
learning to know God, and the second half is going out and doing
Yeah.
something about it. So kind of preparing. We went to Mongolia and China, just kind of trailblazing in a sense, finding places to share the gospel and partner.
Did you ever watch that show? Um, Man, it had two best friends and they were filmmakers and they sold everything. Travel the
Oh,
Road.
that's like early 2000s or
Yeah, Travel
whatever.
the Road. Did you ever
Yeah.
watch that?
It's the one I'm thinking of. Like every church group showed it for.
Yeah, it was early 2000s, but they were
Yeah.
filmmakers. There was two, I think a third went to be more the camera guy. They
Yeah.
literally like got a plane or got a ticket on a train or something, went to a place, preached the gospel, then went to and that then kind of had a map in mind, but not really.
Yeah.
They
They
kind of
just kind
just
of went.
literally traveled the road. One of the coolest things ever. And
Yeah.
a couple times they literally got shot out of town to like
Hmm.
leave because they didn't want them, and it was pretty intense.
Yeah.
But that right there, man, is literally what Jesus did, and they were like, "Yeah,
Hmm.
let's do it. Let's film it while we go."
Yeah.
So that's super cool that you got to do that over
Yeah.
there.
There's a time in Mongolia we were kind of in the square just doing some music and skits, and Mongolian like army showed up and kind of was just standing there, stern
Whoa.
face, just staring at us for like, do we keep going? What do we
Yeah, do we
do?
stop? They didn't say anything?
No, they did it for a while, and then we ended
Yeah.
up. So that was kind of open. And we invited people back to a church that we were partnering with to like do a service, and
Yeah.
a bunch of those military guys came to this service,
Really?
and we were just so they were watching what was going on, and
Hmm.
we had a translator as we are kind of doing things, and then one of our like hosts shared his testimony with the whole group that was
Uh,
there, kind of a bunch of locals,
yeah.
and at the end there was one of the military guys that was like crying in the back, and our
Wow.
translator, our host, was able to like talk with him and share the gospel
Yeah.
with him, and I didn't hear the whole end of it, just it was all in Mongolian,
Hmm.
but they were hugging at the end, they were crying. This like very stern military guy just
Yeah.
met Jesus there, so.
Man, that's so cool, dude. I love that. I love that stuff. Okay, so adventuring, Mongolia, Australia. What's next?
Yeah, China, and then we came.
Yeah.
China, we were only there for like 2 weeks, so we didn't do a whole lot
Yeah.
there. But when I came back from YWAM, I'm like, do I go back to school or not?
Yeah.
And end up working that summer at a camp that I grew up at, and the director there offered me an internship. So
Yeah.
I'm like, sweet, I'm going to do camping.
Yeah.
So I started as an intern doing guest service housekeeping stuff for a year. But that was where I really learned like discipleship. My boss became the biggest mentor for me, Lee Lance. He does facility stuff. And every day he'd be like, Dane, are you reading the Bible? What are you learning? What are you going into? Just like
Oh man, that's
challenge me in
awesome.
that, just doing day-to-day life with him.
Yeah.
Where like sometimes like, hey, did you read the Bible this morning? I'd be like, no, I didn't get around to it. He's like, we're not working until you go do that. And so
Wow.
get back, go do that, and then we'll come back so we can
That
talk
dude
about it
sounds
while
like
we're
a
doing.
boss, man. I love
Yeah.
that.
So, I mean, he was very stern, very like, again, cleaning camp, making sure everything was
Yeah.
great. But he was like, if your spiritual health isn't there, like, what's the point of the ministry we're doing? So,
Exactly. Yeah. Especially
yeah.
being a leader, you need to
Hmm.
be walking the walk kind of thing, which,
Yeah.
I don't think that was a negative thing. Like, if
No.
you're, because I think a lot, this is what I'm really passionate about. I know you are too, but discipleship, but like
Yeah.
actual discipleship. Like I
Hmm.
have a couple good friends that are my friends, but first and foremost, they know I am discipling you. And
Yeah.
like, so I can call out stuff and I want you to call out stuff in me too, because the way we all talk about it and look at it, it's literally like a Jedi and a Padawan.
Yeah.
Now, like Obi-Wan and Anakin, they both grew. It wasn't just
Mhm.
Anakin that was growing up. And it was cool that they were both so young that they could grow up together. Because I think a lot
Yeah.
of times in our spiritual walk, we hit a plateau that we can't really grow unless we have a disciple and we can kind of teach them
Hmm.
what we know, and that opens us up to kind of grow alongside them. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of times where I'll say some stuff that's kind of mean, but it's like it's
Hmm.
truthful. And
Yeah.
honestly, I wish someone would tell me this kind of thing. And
Get the guts to
I've got
offend
some,
people. Yeah.
yeah, I've kind of got some mentors in my life that call me out on some things. And I have this one friend, Tyler, who's very prophetic, and it's almost annoying sometimes. I don't know if you have friends like that, but he'll like text me out of nowhere and be like, "You need to take a break. I can feel in the spirit. You're
Yeah.
getting weak. You're getting tired. You're getting lazy,
Yeah.
or whatever." And I'm like, "I hate you, but thank you. I
Oh
love you,
yeah.
bro." Yeah, that
Yep.
sort of thing. Man, that's cool. So in this, did this open up that gate of just like you doing this kind of ministry with the camps and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So I did intern for a year, and then I got hired on as full time like
Hmm.
that next year, and I ended up running our ropes courses, so all the climbing walls, zip lines, doing
Hmm.
all that. And I was running a high school program, so we had about 400 high schoolers volunteer every
Wow.
summer at camp that I was overseeing. We called it the disciple team, and so the whole
Wow.
thing was training them how to work at camp, but also teaching about the Bible and just diving into scripture
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
kind of showing them that way. So I did that for 7 years at that camp, just being outdoors, doing camping stuff, but also training and developing young people.
Yeah, yeah, to make more disciples, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what the goal. That's what
Hmm.
I think a lot of churches need to. You don't want to say like program, but it needs to be a program of like
Yeah.
training disciples to make more disciples. And that's another big thing I want to do with the channel is like
Hmm.
have this adventuring the way to get people kind of in, and then later down the road have some type. And I don't know how I'm going to do it with online. I'll have to
Yeah.
figure that out, but basically like courses and things that will help you build a way to become a disciple and then make more disciples. And
Hmm.
almost like the Gaborum kind of did it with different groups and things and
Yeah.
having a, anyway, it's all hopefully one day, Lord
Yeah.
willing, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing with social media. Just I post a lot on TikTok, Instagram, and that's what I
Hmm.
like figured out with high schoolers. They're all on social media. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna just do what I can to try to teach them and walk alongside them in those ways, even though
Yeah.
like discipleship, it needs to be personal. Like
Yeah.
maybe it's an introduction, it
Yeah,
gets them started.
the goal with all of it is to, I think, catch them. It's, I'm learning a lot of this just kind of on the
Yeah.
fly, but like catching people with the shorts or the different shorter versions, getting
Hmm.
them on for like the medium length kind of versions, and then figuring out a way. And this is kind of where my mind's going towards is like, how can I help them make disciples and then almost have like a home church in their own
Yeah.
home, kind of like a D&D group. Like they get
Hmm.
together once a week. If you want to play D&D, cool, that's fine. But like
Yeah.
also maybe supplement, watch one of these videos, talk about scripture a little bit, then kind of do your thing, hang out, eat. I mean, that's
Hmm.
what the early
Do life
church did.
together.
They
Yeah.
came, they ate together, they prayed together, they studied scripture, and they did life together. And that's
Hmm.
really like my focus and end goal with Nerds in Christ with the
Yeah.
channel is to get to that somehow.
Hmm.
So again, I keep bringing that up. It's not about me, Dane.
No, but it's good. Yeah, I love hearing, yeah, the goals for that because that's good.
Yeah, that's my heart desire. And
Hmm.
I have some people saying like you should be asking for money basically. And I'm like, I hate that idea. I
Yeah.
hate it. But I have my mentor is literally like make a business plan, make and
Hmm.
present this and I'm like that I just don't. I maybe because I'm going to a conference in November.
Yeah.
It's at a stinking castle. I'm so
Oh,
excited, but
yeah.
it's a nerd ministry summit
Okay.
kind of convention for nerd ministers and like
Yeah.
people, digital missionaries, basically.
Hmm.
Super excited. It's a very niche thing, but a
Yeah.
very needed thing because
Hmm.
TikTok, Twitch, gaming, the gaming industry, everything is so massive,
Yeah.
and no one's really trying to get these kids, get these young people, and that's where the Lord's lead me to do that. But
Hmm.
what I was gonna say is I don't remember.
Yeah, but do you make it a whole nonprofit? Do you make it
Yeah,
this whole
exactly
thing?
that.
Yeah.
And my mom, who's extremely prophetic and just deep in the word, is just like, don't you think if God wanted this funded, he would have already funded it by now? And I'm like, yeah, mom, you're right. I know. But so I think that after this summit, God's gonna,
Yeah.
and I keep hearing stuff and seeing stuff in scripture and the bit different people I follow online.
Hmm.
Everything is pointing to like this journey that I'm on. I just heard
Yeah.
today, somewhere in Haggai, I think, talking about a signet ring.
Mm.
And then I love Psalms, and Psalm 24 is all about climbing this mountain, but you have to have
Yeah.
clean hands and a pure heart and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. This has been 2024, and so I was like, and so I've been reading that all through the year of like, God, I want clean hands so I can go up on this mountain and proclaim
Mm.
you basically to the multitudes or
Yeah.
whatever. And so I read 25 the other day, and now I can't remember what it was, but it
Mm.
was very much the future of I think where
Yeah.
God's leading me. But again, Dane, this is about you. So you're
That's
in.
good. Yeah.
Are you in this full time by now? Where do we end
Yeah.
at?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
working at camp full time. So
yeah,
year round, we have summer camp, but also fall groups, winter groups, spring groups. And
yeah.
again, doing what I love. I got to work at camp, got to do discipleship, got to do
Man,
ministry.
that was
Big,
always a dream of mine is to be a camp leader because I went to a
yeah.
couple good camps and they were just camp leaders were just always the coolest.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
dude, do you do this for a living? This is so cool.
Yeah. So it was great to live at camp. And I was,
Yeah,
young 20s and I was single. So I could spend all the time I wanted there, which
yeah.
led to a lot of, led to burnout, because I was
Oh, really?
working, months straight at a time without taking a day off. And it was
Right.
just
Yeah.
like, I'm like, I love what I do, but it's so exhausting. It's so tiring and I just can't
Yeah.
keep up with it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was doing that full time for 7 years and I was getting to the point of like, do I leave? What do I do if I leave camp? I don't know anything else at this point and
Yeah.
just kind of wrestling with that. And that was around 2020 when I was kind of struggling with that. And I was just like, do I go? And unrelated to COVID stuff, but I ended up leaving after that summer. So 2020
Okay.
summer finished up.
Yeah.
And I moved down to the Twin Cities in Minnesota, started working at a nursing home doing maintenance. Like I was just like,
Yeah.
here's
I
a
mean, hey.
job, doing
Yeah.
maintenance stuff at a
So
nursing
did you do
home.
maintenance at the camp too?
Just
Just
for
in
that
general?
internship year.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm mostly doing programming stuff. I was like, well, I have a little background in this,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's my sister worked there, so it kind of got into the
Oh, there
job
you
where
go.
they
Yeah.
they needed somebody, and I was like, sure it'll pay the bills,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
it's very, very different. And I'm like, this isn't, I don't like this. Like, I need to do ministry. Like,
Yeah.
working in a senior living home and other stuff like that was good for a time. But I'm like, no, I want to get back into do ministry stuff. And so I was only there for 3 months, and then I ended up working at a Christian university doing security. So I was doing
Really?
12-hour overnight shifts doing security at this Christian university, which I'm like, sure, that's ministry. Like they hired
Ish.
me,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of knowing my ministry background.
Yeah.
But how can security not just be the big scary guys, but how can
Yeah.
we develop a relationship with the students? And
Yeah.
so that led to a lot of neat opportunities. Of again, it's 2 a.m. sitting out on the grass, and a bunch of students are like, hey, we're struggling with depression. I'm like, so did I. Let's talk about it. And
Yeah.
these conversations that it led to. And just so as I was walking around the school, people were like, hey, it's Dane. He's the nice security guy. Let's talk to
Yeah.
him. And people gonna approach me that way, which is a great way, just like
Hopefully
this
you got a lot
unexpected
of free
way.
coffee that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, just staying up all
Uh,
night. My whole schedule shifted. Yeah,
yeah.
because being awake. And then so the church I was attending, when I could go just with my weird schedule, they had a young adult ministry. And so I'm like, oh, I need community. I'm gonna go join this.
Yeah.
And so I started meeting with them, and I had the days free, and so you're just not sleeping anyway. But so I'd be meeting with them the day, and one of the gals who was a leader of the group, she played piano and I played guitar and sing. So we started leading worship together.
Hmm.
And during that time, I was like, oh, this girl's pretty cute.
Hey,
So
hey.
I'm kind of working together for that year.
Yeah.
And then we ended up dating, and then we got married.
Man, I'm Matt.
It
That's
was
so
great.
cool,
Yeah.
man. You're like playing guitar. Hey, worshiping God
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, it was just cool.
That's
Like we
cool,
wanted like
man.
finding somebody who can do ministry with together,
Yeah.
and so we're able
Yeah.
to do that. But then during that time I started working at the church part-time as a youth pastor while I was working full-time at the school doing security. So I was
So
night
you
watch by
honestly
night.
didn't sleep.
No, I just didn't sleep. And then I was youth pastor by day, night watch by night, and it was yeah,
Wow.
so craziness
Yeah.
with that. But
That's
when we got
crazy.
married, I was only down there for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
But when we got married, we want to do ministry together. And the
Yeah.
part-time job at the church, I'm like, well, this is full time. And so we're like, hey, where do we go? Like, where do we live? And so we ended up moving to Colorado. We're like, hey, we're gonna get married. Let's just go somewhere else. So
Yeah.
we applied for a camp in Colorado and got accepted out there. So we moved, got married, and started new jobs all within a month,
Wow.
which was a crazy, crazy
That's
time.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I do not recommend that, but we're just like,
No.
we felt God's calling. Hey, we're going to go.
Yeah.
And so we moved out there. We actually moved out there a month before we got married. So she moved into our house. I lived
Yeah.
in a camp cabin for a month. And
There
then
you
we came
go.
back to Minnesota, got
There you
married, and then
go.
moved back out there. So
Yeah.
crazy time of just trusting God in that. But
Yeah. That's a good story, man. So where are you at now?
yeah, so we were out there for about 2 years.
Hmm.
And then just this past January, things at that camp were very unhealthy.
Oh, really?
Just a lot of stuff going down. That this past January, like we met with the director, we met with the board, we met with like the whole like the board chair, to kind of discussing stuff, and we're like, we can't stay here anymore. So we ended up leaving there, looking for places, and we're like, if we're gonna move again, we're gonna move back to Minnesota, back where our family is, like
Yeah.
somewhere else. So kind of looking out back at camps in Minnesota, and Grindstone Lake Bible Camp is the camp I'm at now.
Mhm.
It came up, and the current director, he was going to step down, and he was like, hey, we need a new director. Would you consider applying for this role? And so we applied, met with the
Wow.
board, and now starting September 1st, I stepped in as the executive director of this ministry.
Yeah.
In the summer, we served as like program directors, kind of helping out, but it's unique where I'm the only staff member here.
Yeah.
It's not a year-round camp yet. The goal is to build a retreat building so we can be open year-round. But right now it's just me. My wife works remote, kind of hybrid, but the
Hmm.
goal is to get her on staff at some point once we become year-round. So
Wow,
yeah,
man. That's super cool. So where exactly is it at?
yeah. So it's if you know like the Twin Cities in Minnesota, it's about an hour north of like
Okay.
Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Crap, because you said Colorado, that's where the Nerd Summit's gonna be. I was like,
Oh
man, I
yeah.
could meet up with you.
Yeah, we were out there for two
Uh,
years and we just moved
yeah.
back. So
Yeah. Okay, cool. Very cool, man. Okay, so what do you want to talk about now? That was pretty much your story, right?
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
that's a lot of it right there. So
Yeah.
I mean, just the biggest thing, like God's been faithful through it all, and
That's
just kind
that's what
of
I heard is like you have had the faith time and time again to step out and just follow him. And he's just been faithful the entire time. And that's,
mhm.
I think, so many times with like stories, our life, our testimonies, all that kind of stuff. And if you don't believe it, just read through the Bible. It's like if you just turn around and look at your past,
Yeah,
God has been in it. I mean, you everything you have been talking about. It's like God has been working in so many different ways
Hmm.
and has been building your character and your asset, your the things that you can do, the things that you are passionate about doing. He's guided all of that to where you sit right now, which is so cool. I love that about our
Yeah.
God. He
Yeah.
he loves the tiny little things because he knows what it'll do for you at the
Hmm.
end. Even though a lot of times in the journey, it's just like, I do not want to keep walking. I don't want to go, continue down this. It's hard or whatever. We all have bad days. I'm
Yeah.
sure you still struggle with sleep, like you said,
Hmm.
sometimes. And it's like, so many different times. It's like, but God's faithful. He's still good,
Yeah.
you know?
That's the great part. Like you just being able to share testimonies, being able to share the story. In
Yeah.
Revelation 21, it says, the accuser will be overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their
Yeah.
testimony, right?
Yeah.
Like blood of the Lamb, ultimately, amen. But also,
Right.
like, there's power in the testimony where God's like, no, I want to partner with you. And
Yeah.
how does your life point back to Christ through that? And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. That's good. So, I know you're a heavy student. You love to study because the stuff you share. I mean, you probably study a
Hmm.
lot. What are like
Yeah.
a handful of books, maybe? Because I love reading too. I love reading and writing and studying. We're very, very similar.
Yeah.
We should stay more connected, bro.
We should.
But
Yeah.
what are like a handful of books that you're just like, man, I love these. I couldn't live without these, or they really changed your mind on some things?
Yeah. So a lot of what I study is that first century kind of
Yeah.
discipleship, first century Israel, even Old Testament stuff. But a lot of my favorite authors, I'm going to butcher her last name, but Lois Teverberg,
Mhm.
she wrote a book or a few books, Sitting at the Feet of Rabbi Jesus, Walking in the Dust of Rabbi Jesus. And she has a few other ones, but just talking about the cultural context of
Mhm.
understanding the Bible.
I
Um,
haven't heard of that one. I'll have to grab that one.
yeah. Kenneth Bailey, he was a professor out in the Middle East. He lived there forever, but he's got a bunch of books. But two of the main ones that come to mind is Jesus through Middle Eastern eyes and
Mm.
Paul through Mediterranean eyes. And they're both like thick
Ooh, I
books.
bet those would be good.
I think again, they just talk about he's a very educated man, but I
Yeah.
mean, it's a whole paper that, massive paper that he wrote, just kind of understanding
Yeah.
those,
Yeah.
which is some great ones. One that I'm currently reading, I just got it, and it's um, blanking on the name right now. But it's Jesus through Jewish eyes.
Yeah.
David Hoffberg, or
I
yeah,
think I have that one. But I haven't read it yet. Or at
okay.
least it's on my to be read, maybe.
Yeah, so I just started
Yeah.
reading that one like yesterday.
Yeah.
So yeah, some fresh stuff, and
Yeah.
a few like people like Ray Vanderlaan, if you're familiar, like he's got focus on the family stuff, but he
Right.
does a lot
Yeah.
of teaching in Israel type of videos and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and
Yeah.
just different resources,
I
trying to
think
find.
that like the longer you're in the following Jesus, the more you kind of or I hope you gear towards, because I think it's spirit led, more of the messianic, like Jewish kind of roots. Because, I think there's a lot of people at two different camps of like,
Hmm.
you know, are Christians or like
Yeah.
Jews and like for whatever reason we split that up, which
Hmm.
it's really one. I mean, really, if you think about it, it's one religion. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yes and no, kind of, because I mean, he grew up a Jew,
Hmm.
so that there's got to be something to that, right?
Jesus was a
So
Jew. The early church was all Jewish, like
right,
Pentecost. That
so
was all
so
Jewish
like
people.
learn
Yeah.
and what you've been posting and stuff about, especially the holy days and stuff. Man, I
Hmm.
can't get enough of those because my girls are still pretty young, but I really
Yeah.
want to implement those different holy days in
Hmm.
our normal calendar. And call me crazy, but like God said, keep these sacred, keep these like the Sabbath. He said, keep this day holy.
Yeah.
I think those other holidays are great because it's a story that points back to Jesus, right?
Hmm.
And that's what I think you do beautifully in your
Yeah.
posts that you do.
And that's the whole point, yeah. Because like Passover, it's talking about the
Yeah,
sacrificing the lamb, and Jesus
yeah,
was killed on Passover.
right.
Unleavened bread is when they celebrate bearing the wheat into the ground,
Mhm.
praying for the harvest. So unleavened bread was the day that Jesus was buried.
Right, yeah,
First fruits is when they celebrate the first growth from the ground.
yeah,
Jesus was raised on first fruits,
yeah.
and so like you see all the way that Jesus fulfilled all this, and like
What
now
about what was the one that just happened?
so
Uh,
Yom
yeah,
Kippur
Yom
just
Kippur.
that's the Day of Atonement. And so
Atonement. Okay.
that's the day where like the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies and they'd tie the
Hmm.
rope around his waist like the one day a year they'd go into the Holy of Holies and just ask for forgiveness for the whole nation. And just
Yeah.
they would atone for the sins. They would, have the two
Man,
goats
that's
and yeah.
that's prophetic. We're in a voting voting year, man. That's cool. And like the
Yeah.
veil was torn when Jesus died, so we have
Yep.
access to that right now.
Yeah.
Man, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. And then Sukkot starts on Wednesday this week, and that's where they
Okay.
celebrated living in booths, where God dwelled with his people.
Oh, is that
And so,
Wednesday?
yeah, Wednesday this
Okay.
week.
I'll
Yeah,
have
it's
to
an
put
eight.
our tent out and kind of teach that to
Yeah.
the girls because
Go tenting. Yeah.
that's so fun. I mean, my firstborn's she's 6 and she's
Hmm.
very smart. And
Yeah.
so she knows, we live in Kentucky. There's actually a coyote in the yard the other day.
Mm.
They've seen bears recently, kind of migrating and stuff.
Yeah.
So she's like, anytime it's dark out, she's like, "You sure there's not bears out here?" I'm like, "I'm positive." What about coyotes? Maybe dogs? I'm like, even if there is, your dad has guns. Like, you're fine. She just, for whatever reason, she has that.
Yeah.
And I grew up with a lot of fear too. So
Hmm.
that's one thing I can talk on in my testimony. But so they're not about sleeping in tents, but I
Yeah.
could probably at least get the tent up, read them the story, kind of talk about what that
Hmm.
means. That this isn't our home. Our home is in heaven, and we need to
Yeah.
treat life as such. Really, we're
Hmm.
sojourners, all that kind of
Yeah. That's
vocabulary.
what I love about like living in tents, because like this past
You
year, my
probably
wife,
do live in a tent for real,
yeah,
right?
my wife and I, we felt like nomads this past year because we
Yeah,
left our Colorado camp in March, but I didn't actually
yeah.
start here until September.
Oh
So we're kind
wow.
of in between. All our stuff was put in a garage. I lived with my
Yeah,
parents for a couple months and then moved to the camp. And
yeah,
just thinking about like that kind of nomadic life of just as we were walking, um, just looking back at Abraham, where for Genesis 12, right, he builds a tent,
yeah.
or he pitches a tent and he builds an altar.
Right.
And then he goes to Egypt because the famine. He comes back and the altar is still there. The tent
Yeah.
is gone. Obviously this temporary dwelling place.
Right.
But these things that God's going to do in our lives that are like permanent, like this structure, this altar, like
Yeah.
build those altars. But the tents,
Right.
it's all temporary. It's like pitch a tent and just kind of like, okay, whatever happens in life, we're going to be humming and going. But again, it's all
Yeah.
temporary. So
It is all temporary. That's so good, man. And
mm,
like, there's many times, especially I think when they pass over the river. I think they're going into the promised land and they put 12 stones up and they're like, for our descendants to
yeah.
remember. There's so many times where like they build an
Hmm.
altar or something like that. It's like so the generations after us
Yeah.
will remember. They'll come to this spot and remember. But you touched on something,
Hmm.
how we're sojourners and all this kind of stuff. And isn't it like super symbolic that there comes a point where you like plant a vineyard and you make wine because it takes a long time to grow
Yeah.
grapes to actually make wine. Do you know kind of more of the history on that?
Yeah, grapevine, I haven't studied too much. I know there's some trees in
Yeah,
Israel that like you plant it and it takes 40 years to grow. So
right,
like, you plant it for the next generation. And
right.
like
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
Abraham, all these trees that he plants, it's not for him, it's for the next
Right.
generation that's
Yeah.
coming. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought like grapes you plant and
Yeah.
it's not like 7 years or something, a long
Mm.
time before you can actually get grapes that, are good for
Get the fruit out of
making
it.
wine.
Yeah.
And then, usually wine it takes anywhere from a year to 10 years to be actual good wine. So that I've always anytime
Yeah.
I read that in the Bible, I'm like, because so often we're supposed to be sojourners and walking all over and live in tents and this isn't our home, but then God provides like some wine so that we need to put our roots down here and kind of
Hmm.
maybe establish disciples or whatever
Yeah.
that case may be. So
Hmm.
anyway, lots of
Well, it's interesting,
rabbit
like
trails and
Paul, when he's
things.
on, yeah. I was thinking about Paul's missionary journey. His first one, he was just church plant, church plant, church plant, church plant. He kept
Yeah,
going. But the
yeah,
second time around, he stopped and he made disciples. Then he stopped
right,
and he made disciples. Like it wasn't just the church planting, but he was
right.
building into the lives of those young
Yeah,
guys. So,
that's so
yeah.
cool, man. That's so cool. I think that more of the basic stuff like that is kind of where we as Christians today need to get back to because obviously I'm going
Yeah.
to do this online ministry because I feel called to it, but more
Yeah.
than anything, I feel called to the basic ancient ways of making disciples
Hmm.
one-on-one conversations with people and like trying to pour into
Yeah.
a single person's life. And I've said it even with the books I've written, even if I help one single person, all of this is worth it
Hmm.
because if I can help one
Yeah.
person feel the love or see the light of Christ, it's worth it. It's totally worth it to me.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't know how many people we, growing from that. It's the phrase
Yeah,
like you can count
right.
how many seeds are in an orange, but not how many oranges are in a seed, right? Like
Right.
you
Yeah.
plant that one, but you have no idea what's going to grow from that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's actually I'm been keeping this kind of on the down low, but I need to send you my notes because you would have a heyday. But I have another book idea I have that basically just back to the garden, like why God started with a garden
Yeah.
and why there's so many different growing analogies or seeds or soil,
Mm.
all that kind of stuff through the Bible. And I want to take like step by step of like, seed, soil, tree, fruit, trimming the branches, all
Oh
that kind of
yeah.
stuff, all through the Bible, and just relate it in modern terms. And I write
Mm.
just like you, I write how I talk. So people
Yeah.
have told me like, I like how you rate because like, or I like how you write because it's like you're having a conversation with me.
Yeah.
But I really want to get that book done, hopefully this winter when I have some
Mm.
downtime. But Heart of the Garden is what I want to call it because I think that's God's
Okay.
heart.
Yeah.
It's just simple,
Yeah.
getting back to the garden. And I don't know how much gardening you've done, but it is so good for your soul. I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's
My wife
that's
loves to
why I
garden,
love
so I got into
Hobbits.
it.
I love Hobbits for that reason
Yeah.
because kick your shoes off, get in the dirt, get in the soil, do all that kind of. You feel so close to God. I swear, it's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, finishing up. I think we'll land the plane pretty soon. We're at
Yeah.
45 minutes. What
Yeah.
are some of your favorite fandoms? You kind of mentioned a couple, but I want to like dig into like a couple that you have.
Yeah. So like, yeah, Green Arrow specifically, the comics,
Yeah,
Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings, which my family grew up with,
yeah,
all the time diving into.
yeah.
Um, so those are probably the top three. I'm trying to think of the Gaborum
Indiana
stuff. I love.
Jones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead. What were you gonna
I was
say?
saying the Gaborum stuff. I love Cliff Graham's writings
Yeah,
with what he's doing with that.
yeah. He's awesome.
But
I wish so badly I could keep better in touch with him. Because I think isn't he working now
yeah.
and then trying to write as he can, that sort of thing?
Yeah, he just started it with a new nonprofit,
Oh, really?
Kavod Family Ministries. He just did an update.
Oh,
Yeah,
really? I need
I
to
can
check
send
that
you that
out.
link, but
Yeah, for sure. And then so Indiana
yeah,
Jones. I haven't really on the channel dove too much into that. I'd love to. I'd love to dive into those movies
yeah,
because there's a verse in Proverbs, I think, that it's the glory of king or glory of God to hide something, but the glory of kings to seek it out. Something like that. I
mm,
could be butchering it,
yeah,
but it's so cool that there's so many different fandoms that like talk about treasures like Tomb Raider, Indiana Jones, a couple
hmm,
others that like why is it that we love ancient stuff and love to like search for treasure and stuff? What is that
yeah,
kind of in our heart to like look for things and because if you've ever
hmm,
like been into an abandoned warehouse or something, there's something about that that's just like, oh, this is so cool.
yeah,
Even though
this
it's like
thrill,
it's a
yeah,
bunch of trash and junk, it's just like it's cool. It's really cool. So what do you think about that?
yeah. Whether it's the history or the story behind
Yeah,
it or just the thrill, and I think
yeah,
like a lot of it's like we're missing something, so we're seeking something else, and
yeah,
whatever
right,
that is, and like
yeah.
Indiana Jones, it points to a lot where again it started more biblical and now it's turned into aliens and time
Oh, I
travel,
don't
but
even. Yeah, yeah,
the original three, that's what I like, but and just as he's like, Steve, okay, what is the history? Because the Bible is true, it is real, it's not just some made up story, but it is these we're not going to find the Ark of the Covenant or things like that,
yeah,
but it is a true history, so how do we connect back to that?
yeah. Wow, that's good. All right. I think we'll stop it there. You got anything else for the
Yeah,
peoples?
no, I think thank you so much for having me on Nerds in
Yeah.
Christ, and it's great to
Yeah.
connect with you, Michael. You got to
You
do this more
too.
often, so
Yeah. I'll try to find you said you TikTok and Instagram. What else did you have?
now
I'll
that's
try to
the two I'm on. I haven't gotten onto YouTube or other stuff yet,
yeah.
but
I'll try to I'll find them and then link them whenever I post this on YouTube.
yeah,
But yeah, man, it's been a blast. We need to have you on here more. I want to do these
yeah.
like testimonies and then have these friends that I have on the internet come on and like talk about a specific topic because I think that'd just be fun,
Oh yeah,
you know?
that'd be great. So
Okay, so I'm gonna hit stop record.